actually got rated by BU's channel. So we've got like 18 people here. Welcome to the stream, people.
We should get them. Hey, if you guys are there on Twitch, you guys should actually come to Discord so you can talk to us.
This is very true. So I will actually copy the link. So this is a very like engaging session every Wednesday. Garrett's been doing it for years. No, not years.
Years, 2 years. Yeah,
Two
like
years. Yeah, I guess it is years now. We did it back in the Vortex.
Basically a millennia in the internet.
Yeah.
Seriously.
This is a long time to have this level of consistency. Garrett is one of the most reliable people I know. I would give him work over anyone else any day of the week, doing design and logo stuff and branding and philosophy.
Pitch decks too.
Yeah, pitch decks. That's his big thing right now. He's been making some incredible pitch decks and helping people raise money very effectively as well.
Yeah, I just finished one this morning for Compound Capital, which is a crypto it's not Compound Capital. It's Compound Digital Asset Management. It's like a crypto hedge fund. It's not exactly a hedge fund, but it's basically a hedge fund. So we're finishing their website up tomorrow, I think. But I'm excited to see that get into action. That's my first sales deck, actually. So
that's awesome.
That's going to be exciting. So
yeah.
That's going to be also. I will briefly touch on this for Sam's benefit, but a certain entity who has plagiarized some of my work has now been delisted from Google because you should not play games with me. So
this is very
cheers
true.
to that.
I respect that, man. I mean, hey, you can't mess around in business when it comes to people just taking advantage of you. And it was very clear the limitations for this specific client, and they would not listen. They didn't think anything would happen, I guess. I mean, he's like, oh, freelancer, small business owner, what is he going to do? He can't take us to court. Well, now they don't appear in Google search results, so get wrecked.
Oh, yeah.
We're not going to throw any names out, but
I'm going to probably go and do Bing and DuckDuckGo and everybody else too, just because why not?
Who uses those? Don't waste your time. I know, don't waste your time with them. They're not worth it. They're not worth it. Don't do stuff out of spite. That was a responsible choice to do. I think they needed that, but I don't think.
See, the question is, I don't know if they're notified about this or not. So if they're not notified, they might go spend a bunch of money on SEO and just get nothing out of it. So
I mean, they were already struggling, and they weren't doing the stuff that I was telling them to do very well.
Like, they didn't. The problem, I would have like continued engaging with them or stuff, but they didn't talk to me about it. They ignored me. I sent them. I was like very polite. I was like, hey, that thing I gave you is unfinished. You shouldn't be using that. I'm happy to do something else for you. I'm happy to do a whole brand, but right now it doesn't even make sense how you've integrated it with your stuff. They both, the COO and the
basically
a managing partner or whatever ignored me.
Yeah, I guess it is
when they clearly are on Discord enough to see those messages. So whatever. I mean, it's not cool to do,
give him work.
It's literally a crime. So
level of consistency.
I don't know. Moral of the story: if anyone ever has copyright violations, hit me up because I will happily help you. It's very easy to file Digital Millennium Copyright Act complaints with Google, ISPs, everybody. So let me know.
Aon Legal Services.
What?
Yeah, it is. I do not provide legal advice.
This is not professional legal advice, but I'll help you professionally.
No, I'll help you for free. It's not.
Okay, yeah, this is a free Triba thing. I really need to get this camera on a stand. Every time I bump my desk, it just wobbles. My camera don't jiggle. It fold. I like the way you wobble. Oh, show. So to this day, the most popular TikTok I've made is that Yeeterman video we did. I don't know if it was this workshop or a different one, but there wasn't much happening that week, and we were just like, let's just make a meme. So we made this meme video of me doing the Yeeterman instead of the Wellerman, and it's got like 11K views. It's like,
that's funny.
That one of all the videos we've done.
Yeah, I had that same experience. Like the more people I've gotten to the Discord was just from a funny meme versus any actual educational content, which drives me nuts. But that's just the nature of the beast, especially.
That's how it works, man. On Twitter, consistently post memes that I steal off of Facebook, I get, I can actually get mildly viral posts, like hundreds of likes and retweets. And it's like my content is like too.
Yeah, actual
I don't know
thought-provoking
what it is,
content
man.
and educational content just does not get engagement unless it's easy to digest or in like a 5-second TikTok or something.
And it has something really interesting at the beginning.
But thorough subjects to learn, they take time and attention, and there's like a shortage of that.
I think it also takes money. Like, people don't want to pay for their education at all. They're like, internet, it should all be free. Well, it's like, yeah, if it's all free, then none of it's going to be, high quality. I guess what I'm trying to say is it takes effort to put stuff in digestible methods like that in formats, and no one's just doing it for free. Everyone has a motive here, whether it's business or they're building their brand, and they want to be an influencer. It's not just free. They're gonna want something in return for sharing educational material. Now, the nice thing about Triba is it actually is free resources, free knowledge, because it's just people talking about what they know and what they've done and what's worked for them, what hasn't worked. And, I like that about Triba. There's no one charging for the stuff, but if you want to go deeper, you can find out more.
Definitely, yes. All right, so what are we talking about today?
Wait, first, welcome BU. BU rated us. 16 people jumped over and we're watching for a little. I think most of them had to go, but thank you so much for that raid, and shout out to BU TV on Twitch. If you're following or watching us, go check out her channel. She's doing the Monday streams with us. Another event like this, workshop on content creation. So this is branding, philosophy. Mondays we got workshop on streaming. Tuesdays is mental health. And Thursday, we skipped Wednesday because it's today, but Thursday is our social media and marketing. So if you guys are interested in those kind of things, check them out.
And for the audience watching, Sam started a good thread on Web3, and it's definitely good to think about in advance versus being surprised when there's a new way to operate in the marketplace with just a growing digital and internet environment, more so than what it already was. For your brand, your operation, your nonprofit, whatever it is. So
exactly. And tonight there's an information roundtable over in the Synergy community that you should also check out if you want to know more about information strategy and democratization of knowledge and in today's society. Kind of like we were just talking about, like people are charging you for information, or either they're buying your attention or selling your attention or something like that. And if Tabalo's offering this knowledge, this information, I would say it's worthwhile to check it out and see if it's something you need. So we'll drop a link as well, but
yeah, check it out in the events. Garrett, I have a question for you, though, more on the philosophy side. And so there's been this big growing conversation about Elon Musk and Apple now, because Apple threatened to delist Twitter. Apple also immediately responded to the Chinese Communist Party's request to limit their ability to airdrop and Bluetooth data share in certain regions in China. They did that immediately while also threatening Twitter kind of in the same time span. And then just this morning, Spotify CEO kind of also brought up the monopoly Apple has on the App Store and taking 30% of all sales on their devices directly to the U.S. Commerce Department and their European equivalent. So I guess what's the philosophy of being able to build a platform that essentially is a monopoly in the sense of our iPhones are basically the modern day highways or infrastructure. Like we don't have a choice where else to download software on our iPhone. And then also basically just taking like kind of a 30% cut of that, which is equivalent to, pimping out, everybody that uses it. So.
Yeah. Okay. That's a wonderful philosophical topic. So what Tabalo just said is effectively, well, there's two things. So we'll hit the political aspect of that with China and all the censorship second, but Apple has what is called a walled garden strategy. This is what they've called it forever. So the initial reason that they did this is because Steve Jobs had what, in my opinion, was still a very, very good idea, where effectively your desktop and your phone and your laptop and everything works together seamlessly, right? So if you own Apple products, it's very easy to do stuff with Apple product to Apple product. It's great, right? Your texts are different if you're texting Apple people. You can airdrop stuff. However, it's it's a competitive strategy. It's an anti-competitor strategy, right? So what this does, Apple historically is really, really aggressively competitive, right? I personally think competitive behavior is a losing behavior in the long run. It does give you short-term benefits, but you can see the average sentiment of Apple during Steve Jobs' time, people were cool with this. It was not, some people complained, but it's because they were like Windows people. They didn't complain. It wasn't like widespread complaints. It was like, you just dealt with it. iPods were awesome when they came out. It was the best thing ever. It was great, right?
The Shuffle.
Oh yeah, man. The Shuffle, the Nano, it was amazing, right? And it was like actual new stuff was coming out every single year, We have not had anything interesting come out in a long time. The Apple Watch, I have one. It's fine. It's not amazing, right?
I mean, VR headsets are pretty cool, but they've been around for a while. I just don't think they've been accessible to the public until.
Does Apple have a headset?
Oculus, yeah. I mean, yeah. Apple, I think, has a headset now. I'm pretty sure it's like $1,200. It's ridiculous. Let me just. I'll find a link. You keep doing your thing.
No, they don't have one yet. So
Oculus is the Meta Quest.
They do. It's just not. It's not out yet. It's on the way for 2023.
It's rumored. They haven't.
It's a Quest 2 competitor.
Anyway, so you can see though, one of the problems, you could debate the merits of this. So Steve Jobs had a very difficult job, which is to pick whoever is his successor. He picked Tim Cook. Tim Cook is the finance guy. He's a very boring person. That's kind of a good thing because he's managed to really not crash the boat, right? They do the same exact shit they always did. Hey, guess what? We added a camera. We're adding another camera. It's got 15 spider eyes on the back of it. It's ridiculous, right? So in one sense, that's good. However, part of the thing when Steve Jobs had the vision to make the walled garden make sense, it was very cool, right? It's like, oh, great. Who would want to use other stuff? I prefer Windows desktops just because I just don't like the Mac OS very much. And it's more of a pain in the ass to pirate stuff on Mac. But you didn't hear me say that. Not that I do that. Or have done it. I'm just saying it is difficult. It's a good thing because piracy is bad, right? But I don't know. It's, for the most part, it's cooler if all your stuff works together. But the problem with this is, as Apple has started losing the innovation share of the market in the sense of like, they have gotten less innovative. Other people really haven't gotten more innovative, right? That's part of the problem. So there's a thing that happens. And maybe we'll talk about this later. This isn't super on topic, but there's something I was reading on Twitter recently where they said basically Japan is the only first world country left because Japan's crime rate has not exploded like every other modern countries has. So for example, England has 100 times the crime that they had 100 years ago, which is crazy when you think about it.
Wow.
Because you think the more modern things get, the better they get, but they actually don't, right? In Japan, they don't actually have public trash cans because people keep their trash in their pocket to throw it away later, right? To give you an idea of how different that is. And that's what a country should be like, right?
It makes me think that industrialization has almost made us less civilized in certain
It totally has. Maybe we'll touch on that later because I want to answer the Apple questions. But what the point of that is that everybody thinks that because the market leader is where it is, that if they keep improving, that everything's improving. But actually, Apple's just found more ways to not do that much new stuff and keep making tons of money. And potentially even make more money, right? They're worth more now than they were when Steve Jobs was alive. But they haven't really gotten more innovative. And so you have this illusion, as the innovation is leaving the market, you assume that what Apple's doing must be innovating because they're the market leader, but actually they're not really innovating. And so the market's kind of stagnating. Phones are not interesting like they were. Yeah, I don't know if you remember.
Google's doing some good stuff with their phones.
Yeah, but it's not in the way that like the different, like no phones to iPhone or, dumb phones to iPhones were like any of the iPhones up until like 8, where it was like substantially better. Like I have a 13 Pro Max or whatever, and it's like the 10. I had the 10 Pro Max or the X10 XS Max or whatever the hell, and it's basically the same thing. And the 10 is basically the same thing as the 8. Like I haven't noticed a massive difference other than hey, it's slightly bigger and brighter and faster, right? They're not amazing like it used to be when you went from like the 6 to the 8. You're like, oh my god, this is awesome, you know?
Right.
When
and I mean, it's pretty indistinguishable from 8 on. It's just like they're all just phones with more what?
Because
I mean, it's kind of the same thing with graphics cards. It's like they keep making these graphics cards, but graphics aren't even that far along yet. Like you can have a 3060 and it's like you're fine. What, you don't need to go and buy anything better.
Pro Max or whatever. Because it's like the 10. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, it's almost like Moore's Law is starting to kick in. It's not exactly Moore's Law, but it's like Moore's Law for innovation.
I heard that was dead. Is that true?
People say that all the time. We'll see. I don't think so.
Every year. Really, Moore's Law is dead. Next year, double.
Quantum computing is going to be the next. Yeah, they've been saying it forever. It's not. People are really good at figuring out how to continue innovating, right? Unless you're Apple right now, but so what happens is, whereas you think that we're going on this trajectory where the innovation is, I think innovation has actually moved into different sectors because we've kind of maxed out phones, right? Like the iPhone is the 13 is basically the 10 is basically the 8. That's like almost 10 years of like, yeah, it's kind of the same shit, right? The most innovative stuff going on right now, like SpaceX is very innovative. Tesla is very innovative, right? Elon has taken the mantle of being the most innovative guy in the room, right? Frankly, what he's doing with Twitter is very innovative. And so what's going to probably happen, I still think we have a way for this, but what's going to probably happen is some other phone competitor is going to come out of nowhere and do something wildly different. And then they'll revitalize the market when everyone copies them. But if you look at what phones were like, this is my favorite example for all tech patterns and stuff. Phones before the iPhone were like weird. They were all over the place. You had like brick phones, you had non-flip phones, you had flip phones, you had twisty phones, you had slidey phones, you had unfoldy phones, right?
Right.
It was all over the place. It's very weird. Apple comes out with the black rectangle, and then everyone has a black rectangle for the next, almost 15 years, right? But because what in design thinking, you have diverging thought, where a diverging thought says, we don't know what the right answer is, so here are many options to pick from. Converging thought says, hey, we looked at all the options and this is the right answer, right? So pre-Apple, because Apple's the iPhone is a convergence point for the entire phone industry. Nobody knew what to do. Like, hey, is it better to have a flip phone or a twisty phone? Like, I like my little sideways keyboard slidey phone a lot. I really miss having a keyboard, right? That was the best thing ever. Because that, whatever the 1 through 9 texting, I can never figure that out, right? And I don't like Skype either. Yeah, T9. I didn't like that. But so here we are at this inflection point. Apple has been effectively a monopoly on things that go on the phone because of their walled garden. This is a very critical part of their strategy, which is something that Epic pushed back against a couple of years ago, or maybe it was last year, when they were like going to do their own marketplace inside of their app for Fortnite, I think, or one of their games. And Apple was like, just took them out of the App Store, right? Because they were going to try and test, how strong Apple was. They were like, nah, get fucked, right? So we're basically the way that things tend to work when you have a dominant figure in a hierarchy, whether this is the market or physical, like military governmental hierarchies, right? You can look at this example with gorillas. So with gorillas, there's an alpha gorilla and there's a bunch of beta gorillas, right? The alpha gorilla has a harem of female gorillas and the beta gorillas have no women, right? And so what happens is the alpha gorilla, if the beta gorillas look at the alpha gorilla's women or try anything, the alpha gorilla just has to beat the shit out of them, right? And so by doing this, the hierarchy is established. Now, I don't really care to talk about alpha and beta stuff with people, but when you're thinking about markets, it works very similarly. Apple, when Epic is like, hey, I'm going to go try and fight Goliath, right? Apple says no and smashes the shit out of them and says, we're taking you off. You're going to lose millions of dollars today because you're not on, Fortnite's not on here, and all these 13-year-olds that you're stealing money from are free for a little bit, right? And this is the way that it works, right? There are a variety of these sorts of hierarchies. Apple is a host unto itself, but Apple is also part of a different system, which you could call like, pseudo left tech or something like that, like Western technical cultural hegemony or something, right? Like, I don't know, that's not really a good term, but in that sense, when you look at the way that companies like Apple or Twitter or Facebook, any of these Silicon Valley companies are staffed, all of the people that go to these, that work at these companies went to Ivy League schools or like Berkeley, right? They are culturally basically all the same. They went to the same schools, they learned the same stuff from the same people. There's a shared kind of like upper middle to upper class identity. And so they end up doing stuff like, I don't know, like letting China suppress its people because they want to make money. Like, that's the thing. The Western left is very cool with that. If you look at what happened with Blizzard and the protest in Hong Kong or the NBA, everybody just lets China do what it wants because that's just the protocol for that culture of like left-leaning technologists, right? So where this gets really interesting, where this ties back into Twitter, where it was like Elon is notably in a different group of people, right? So the PayPal mafia, meaning the people who founded PayPal, Peter Thiel, Elon, a lot of other people that made billions and billions off of that, or millions and millions, right? Now they're billionaires. But there is a counterforce in the tech culture, which is something like, you could say like post-libertarian, or like they're pseudo-libertarian. They're a little bit more like right-leaning now than libertarians, who I think are non-directional, right? They're like neutral. And so you're seeing this like left group of, like you would say the woke people, or the PC people, or the people that have been in charge of social media, right, who've been banning right-leaning people and stuff like that. They are starting to have a real challenger approach. So unlike Epic with Apple, where Apple can easily smash Epic with no consequences, right? Elon is a lot harder to smash. You can't really do it. And so he said he's going to buy Twitter, and they said, oh, we're not going to let you buy it. And then he said he's going to buy it, and they said, oh, now he doesn't want to buy it. We're not going to let you not buy it. And then he gets it, and they say, oh, it's going to go to shit, and their user metrics are up, and it's like doing way better with literally like a 10th or a 20th of the employees, and everyone's like, what? So what you have to understand is this left technologist stuff and the media are on the same team, right? So you notice that Sam Bankman-Fried, the guy who destroyed FTX recently and lost billions of dollars for tons and tons of people, if you look at the way that news articles like in the New York Times are coming out about him, there's tons of these articles. They're all being very soft on him. This guy who's a fraudster who like was doing drug-fueled orgies with the people that worked at the company in the Bahamas, right? Who's a giant piece of trash. He's an awful person, right? But they're all being very nice to him. They're saying, oh, well, he's a misunderstood genius. And it's like, seriously, I'm not kidding. Crazy like puff pieces that they're doing on him, right? And you have Elon, who's actively like, oh yeah, free speech is cool. Maybe we shouldn't censor people just because we don't agree with their political beliefs. Hey, what if cars were electric? What if we could go to Mars? Like, people fucking hate him. They do not like him at all. And you have this guy who's literally destroyed people's livelihoods. Millions of people are affected by this, or hundreds of thousands, whatever. Entire companies have gone out of business because that guy fucked up. And that guy's getting covered. And then you start to realize, okay, there's something weird going on here because it doesn't make sense on the surface. And then you realize, because SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried, is part of that group of people that will defend its own, right? At the expense of looking non-credible, but it's because they don't care. Apple can say, maybe Epic should be allowed to charge through their app. Apple doesn't care. It doesn't benefit Apple to do that because then they miss out on 30% of their revenue, right? So they smash him away. SBF can lose all these people money, but he was donating to a lot of political campaigns. He has politicians that he's in their pocket, right? He's the second largest donor after George Soros. So for the Democrats, there's other donors on the right? But he also donated to the right. It was leaked that he just did that privately through dark money stuff, which I didn't even know that was a thing. So you realize, okay, there's this clearly a group of people that can get away with whatever they want. They set the rules. They're like Apple with Epic, right? And they don't want people to be able to do something other than what they all agree on. China plays ball is the thing. So they benefit from having access to this gigantic Chinese market as long as they play ball. These aren't morally principled people, right? They're allowing China, which is a regime with a long history of human rights abuses, which includes, I don't know, if you look at how many people died in the Great Leap Forward, it's not something that gets talked about, but it's one of the worst things that ever happened in the world. Nobody cares because they want to make money, right? So where this gets really fun is Elon, Apple has threatened for no reason, with no explanation, to take Twitter out of the App Store if he's letting these people that were banned back on, which is fucking insane, frankly, that you're moderating the users that are allowed in an app on your platform. But again, they could do whatever they want. Rules are not real at a certain level, right? We can all say, oh, that's bad, you shouldn't do that. But there aren't laws governing these things. There are no entities that are preventing people from doing these things. Clearly, if Epic, can't go appeal in court, like, hey, Apple didn't let me do what I wanted on their platform that I agreed to be on, cool. The rules don't apply. They're non-governed in that way. They're governed in other ways financially, but not like that.
So on that financial side, one interesting part about Apple, it's actually the most bought stock in ESG funds. And there's a funny tweet. It's like, what does the S and the G mean in ESG if Apple can just basically suppress human rights in China and then still be touted as a big ESG player? And at least on the business challenges of them trying to really box against Elon is right now they're a $2.2 trillion market cap company. So they're one of the most overvalued or the highest valued company in the world.
I think also in history.
And history, yeah. I guess other than like Saudi Aramco. And basically the thing about the tech industry is it's all predicated on growth. So the growth of through double digit numbers, how does that happen when you have like at a central bank macro level, dollars getting sucked out? And then to add to that, like if you've read Apple's fiscal year strategies on how they're going to grow, essentially their strategy is like, okay, we're going to sell more subscriptions to our base, which is like, hey, more Apple TV, Apple News, and just like Apple micro apps kind of subscriptions. So that's their whole strategy is predicated on that. And then now you have Elon basically saying like, hey, you guys are a monopoly exploiting creators and software makers. And then there's a whole army of people that are on that same page because, like for me, I've built a software. I disabled the functionality to sign up on the iOS app just so I didn't have to pay 30%. So you have to go sign up through the web app where you just use Stripe and they charge you like 2%. Because 30% is a lot to take from someone who's like trying to small scale revenue, So it's a big deal.
Yeah. So here's where that starts to come against Apple. So remember the gorillas? What happens to gorillas is when the alpha gorilla gets unpopular enough or gets old and gets weak, whatever, then 3 or more of the beta gorillas will team up and beat him to death, right? So if he ever stops like keeping them in their place, they start to get cocky and then they team up and kill him, right? And if you notice, that is the way that everything works. Hey, how did America beat England? America teamed up with the French and got a lot of funding. Cool. That's the way the world works. When you get weak, then your competitors team up and kill you, right? So Epic, which is a fucking huge company, already tested the waters and they didn't win, but Epic is salty, right? Elon could very easily jump in with them and say, guess what? We're making this new phone, which he's talked about doing. Apple said, we're going to kick Twitter off. He says, if we do it, I'm going to make a phone. Fuck you, right? He could do that and then say, guess what, everybody? you only have to pay 10% fees if you're on our phone, and everyone will jump ship, right? And then it'll take a while for that to kick in, but like, man, it'd be really cool if the guy who's making all the cool shit in the world made a cool ass phone, right? If they're going to make an innovative phone, it's not coming out of Apple because they haven't done that since they invented the iPhone, you know? So it's really interesting too, because then what would probably happen next, what tends to happen, this is where people don't understand the levels of censorship and the levels of like market suppression that go on. But let's say, for example, my name is Caballo, and let's say I say Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself, right? And that's, the government has decided you're not allowed to say this, right? Because it's true. Caballo says this. He gets kicked off of Twitter or Facebook, right? Cool. Caballo decides to make his own platform, or just whatever. He goes on Parler or Getter or Gab or some other shitty platform, right? Yes. So, well, Caballo's on this platform. Maybe he's monetizing through this platform. He's got a Patreon. Well, guess what? Now Caballo gets kicked off of Patreon. He says, okay, well, I'm going to go on a different monetization platform, right? Okay, well, you go on, I know they have this, there's a different, like an uncensorable monetization platform. He goes on that. Well, guess what? The credit card companies say, well, fuck you. You're not going on here, right? They cut off your credit card stuff. Okay, Caballo goes to crypto. He's good. Crypto can't be censored. Bitcoin, nobody can stop you from using Bitcoin, right? That's pretty cool. However, if you're trying to get fiat on-ramps to crypto, meaning I want to take my my money and purchase some crypto, those are all governed. You could get kicked off of those. So if I'm Robinhood or Coinbase or FTX or any of these other things, they can say, actually, no, Caballo's not allowed to do anything because he's a sensationalist terrorist or something, right?
And in China, they literally attribute you with a red COVID pass. On that, like that's the mechanism they, at least from a government level.
I mean, China is obviously totalitarian, though. That's the difference. So we're not there yet, but there is a soft totalitarianism that is going on with this kind of like political, technological, corporate, unholy union, right? So Kanye, for example, who, you know, probably got banned for good reasons off of stuff. Kanye is talking about buying his own bank because he got debanked, right? We'll see if that works out. I don't know. But what ultimately, there's an enormous kind of pressure for people who are not in this special club of people who all agree on shit that involves like letting China conduct human rights abuses and all of these things. There's an enormous pressure for these people to build their own entire financial and technological system, which is basically happening. So if Elon, this is where it gets really interesting. If Elon makes his own phone, Apple certainly has some kind of leverage, like Apple's partnered with AT&T, I believe. Apple could say, hey, guess what? Cellular providers are not going to carry the Elon phone. And then Elon can say, well, guess what? The Elon phone works on Starlink. That's where we get something crazy going on. So imagine, you know, the X phone is on Starlink. Anybody can use this, and it's, you know, all you have to do is pay for the internet, right? You'd be able to get Starlink is awesome. But imagine being able to have like internet-based, not cellular, but internet-based phone access from anywhere in the world, right? That's when we're talking about something that's more innovative than the iPhone, because the cellular network is actually really old, right? It's very outdated. You would be able to get a bunch of people to adopt Starlink. You'd be able to make your own ISPs. You'd be able to ignore it, because that's another level of censorship. ISPs, like with Kiwi Farms, which was, I don't know exactly what Kiwi Farms was. It's some kind of discussion board that got branded as this like alt-right hate site or something. It's probably like 4chan. But Kiwi Farms got banned from the ISP level and from the web host level. So like their service providers killed their domain, I think, and their web hosts like dropped them, and they went to other ones, and people did like a coordinated attack to get them taken off of everything, right? So they took the site down. So if you had Starlink, you could ignore the rest of the internet. Like, I don't think the network is necessarily there yet in the way that the real internet is, but he could theoretically build, like he's poised to build, an entirely free, separate communications platform. Like the whole thing,
and
financial, cellular, internet.
At a global level, Starlink is actually one of the biggest innovations to happen in the communications industry for quite some time. Most people don't know Starlink actually reduces the latency for specifically banks out of New York and London than it goes underwater. So there's like 0.01 of a second or whatever it is that the banks actually have a value proposition on that. And not only that, it connects rural farmers. So there's a big play that could happen. And Garrett, I kind of want to get your 2 cents on this is this social capital that Elon has. And I support him. I am a believer in, building and a lot of the principles he's standing for with free speech. And I'm curious how you see this like ESG social capital of like Apple's basically the most ESG company in the world versus like Elon Musk, who Tesla's less ESG than ExxonMobil.
But that's because it's bullshit, right? So this is the thing. You have to understand that at a certain level, like I said, the rules stop applying. The world does not work. There's a concept of like emergence where, let's say, the phrase the sum is greater, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, right? If you take what's a good example of this?
I think you're trying to point like the entourage effect, right? Like where it's like in totality it works better than isolated parts.
What I'm saying, basically, here's a good example. If you have one person, 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, right? At every level of social organization, there are emergent effects. So you cannot get mob psychology out of one person or 10 people. You can get it out of 100 people. You can't get larger than Dunbar's number effects out of 100 people because that's Dunbar's number. But out of 160, out of 200, 1,000, you can. You'll get separate groups that form. And at higher levels of organization, new rules emerge or new laws that govern these larger things, right? So, a good example of this, like hummingbirds. Hummingbirds can have flappy wings that flap really fast because they're tiny, right? You could not have a hummingbird the size of a whale. You could not have a spider that's bigger than a cat because it would collapse in on itself. Exoskeletons only get so big, right? You couldn't have a whale-sized creature that lives on land, right? Because the water supports it in a different way. So at different size levels, the laws that govern them, physical and social, are different, right? So basically, all of this to say that the rules that these things operate on, that Elon and Bezos and the government and the banks are operating in a world where the social rules are different and frankly are above the law because the law is written for normal people for the most part, right? The reason why white collar criminals never go to jail, they certainly aren't going to like maximum security prison where they're going to go get their ass beat by gangs or, other horrible things that happen in prisons. Because it's just not how it works, right? You get different rights than people, and it's not it's not fair, but that's the way it works because who's going to do anything about it? You don't have money or power to do anything about it, right? And so
it's designed that way.
Yeah, it's intentionally designed that way because the people who design it are benefiting from it. And so who watches the Watchmen? Quid est custodes custodes, right? So
ESG is environmental social governance or corporate governance?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, ESG is effectively a score that was invented by a lot of people, but popularized by BlackRock. BlackRock is a hedge fund or a capital management organization where BlackRock buys basically like 10% of a bunch of companies. They have basically everyone. They had 10% of Twitter before Elon bought it. That's partially why they hate him. They hated Tesla for a long time though too, because Elon pushes back against their shit. But so what ESG does is a way for them to say about a bunch of companies that are fucking terrible for the environment and society and governance, right? They can say, oh, well, ExxonMobil did the things that we asked them to do, so we're going to bump their environmental score up, right? ExxonMobil planted a tree last year, so they're cool. And so they also, you can look into this. I did a podcast on this with Christopher. I'll find the podcast and share it in here. I talk about ESG a lot. I did a lot of research for this and I forgot a lot of it.
So just to add on the BlackRock and ESG mandates, because BlackRock is a 10% owner in basically every public and who knows how many private companies in the US and the world for that matter. But even it goes above them, and it comes from the Bank of International Settlements, which is considered the central banks of central banks. And it's a part of this green finance and climate change mandates that are coming out of Basel in Switzerland. So,
right. So basically, it's like, hey, you have points. We determine these categories. They mean basically like diversity stuff. The reason why this is very popular is because it's included in your ESG score. If Tabalo's company says, hey, we're going to make sure that we have like half of our C-suite is, women of color, bisexual women of color or whatever the hell, right? Then we're going to get a better ESG score because that's what they've decided, that having racial, gender quotas, sexual orientation quotas are cool as long as you do it the way that they want you to do it. That's how it works, right? So the reason why all the ads have been getting like very like LGBTQ focused, which is crazy. I mean, if you know the actual percentage of like LGBT people in the population, it's very, very small. But then you have like every single company in the world is just putting out like tons and tons of ads that are all like this. It's like, oh, it's because they're making money by doing this. They're being coerced into doing this by BlackRock, because if BlackRock doesn't like it, they'll fuck your score. And then you don't get funding. You get fucked, right? Most people, regardless of whether they're rich or poor or otherwise, are followers, and they are not confrontational, right? They will not stand up to BlackRock because they're smaller than them. And because if they stop giving you money, then you're fucked, right? Hey, guess what? We need to take out a loan. Oh yeah, BlackRock fucked us. Now no one will lend us money, right? Nobody wants to be associated with us. So it's really, it's dominating cartel behavior where BlackRock buys some of your company and tells you what to do. They get a seat on your board. They get to come to your meetings and say, hey, guess what, fucker? You're going to do what we said, or we're going to ruin your life, right? So it's the same thing the mob does. It's just done at a higher level. So we think it's cool, and we think it's like this big, great democratic progressive thing. It's very anti-democratic. It's absolutely like centralized cartel behavior, right?
It's like gaslighting and capitalism, and it's all a farce because they don't adhere to this when it comes to their like Middle East markets or Chinese markets.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, look at everybody's Saudi Arabian corporate logo during Pride Month, and it doesn't have rainbows on it. They pretend like they edit out like gay people or any kind of LGBTQ stuff in China, in the Middle East, because they're fucking hypocrites. They're liars, and they just do this stuff to get money out of it, and they do it because BlackRock has them by the balls, right? And so it's interesting because you see all the social fallacies when you make a metric the goal and how it gets easily manipulated. Like I can tell you some examples with some big Texas oil operators and offices, and essentially for them to get those carbon credits that give them all these tax benefits that they're working towards with this ESG hoopla, instead of them actually having to clean up their mess, they can engineer it by like saying, oh, we're just going to buy all this acreage that has trees on it. And they'll just buy a bunch of acres with trees on it, and then they can engineer the math without actually cleaning anything up. So that's what it's incentivizing. There's always going to be shortcuts. And these type of manipulations are natural in social systems, but when you kind of get gaslit that they don't exist, and if you question them, then you're like basically a social criminal. A pariah is a better word.
Or pariah, yeah. It's lunacy, and it's honestly a form of psychosis.
It's literally like totalitarian behavior is what it is. But again, nobody knows about the stuff. Nobody asks questions. The people who get asked questions get beat down, and that's the way that the social hierarchy is enforced. The social hierarchy, at the end of the day, is always enforced through violence. You can't just go beat Elon Musk's ass in public, so they enforce it through financial violence, right, through competitive business behavior. And because
Character
that stuff
assassination.
operates, character assassination, lies in the press, slander, libel, whatever you want to call it, that's how it works. That's how it's enforced. So you basically, I mean, here's the thing. There is a culture of silence that exists. You're not allowed to talk about it, because if you talk about it, you become a right-wing extremist or some kind of like alt-right, far-right person. Doesn't matter if you're a lifelong liberal, like Elon's a lifelong Democrat, right? A lot of these people.
And he's promoted sustainable energy and renewable energy,
right? Yeah,
before it was cool, you know.
He like literally the most like sustainable company, the most forward-thinking sustainable company is Tesla. I don't give a fuck what you think about it. Like, that's just a fact. And saying that like oil companies are somehow more green, which they did with ESG, they got higher. They lowered or took Elon off the sustainability, or Tesla off the ESG rankings, because the BlackRock doesn't like him. Like, and this is the thing too that people don't understand, is it doesn't matter how high functioning or high, like rich or powerful these people are. They are just as petty and stupid as the average person is. They're just raised with power and influence and to conduct themselves in a certain way that we think that they're not just as dumb as everyone else. But like, even in Greek mythology, Zeus is an idiot, right? The gods are just as capricious and childlike as people are. And that's, I think, why Greek mythology and Roman mythology is like that, because it's like, you can't put these people on a pedestal. They are normal people that just have power and wealth and no accountability whatsoever, right? They're friends with the judges, they're friends with the politicians, they are friends with the banks, and you aren't. And they will gladly gamble on your life saving, cause 2008. No one gets in trouble for it. They'll do it again. Now you can't afford a house because guess what? BlackRock, Evergrande, all these foreign companies are buying up houses and treating them like assets instead of places that individual people need to be able to live to have a fucking family, right? They're introducing stupid ass shit like fake meat, which is like disgusting. It has a horrible, disgusting long list of fake bullshit, genetically modified stuff, because they've decided that's better for you than food that naturally originated, that people ate for millions, if not billions of years, right? So what you have to understand is at this high level, they treat normal people with contempt. They think the average person is a dumb person who's designed to like be a slave, basically. And that's what the economic system is built around. It's not a conspiracy. Look at how they talk to you. Hey, the vaccines are totally effective. Oh, just kidding. You're going to have to get vaccines for the rest of your life. They don't actually work that well. But how many times do they say? How many times do the people in power say it's 100% effective? I can find you a compilation of this too. Wally, do you know what video I'm talking about?
I think so. I don't have it on.
I'm going to see if I can find it, but
on that same note, it's interesting because it's like a fabric of nature that energy sucked, but it's not it's not like thermonuclear energy or thermodynamic energy like we think of it. Because you have to understand, a lot of government debt is predicated on the amount of people and the amount of, like, for in the US, the amount of social security numbers, that these fall into legal structures. These fall into legal and trust structures. So, it's like, you could say your name is this, or that, but from the government point of view, you're just a number. And that's by design, and you can essentially create money because of that, and you can you basically securitize humanity, just to have more leverage in capital means. But everything comes to roost, and when you go in the future, there's going to be a time where there's an inflection of the hyper productive and the hyper people driving growth and innovation, and then there's going to be a bunch of laggards that are still using the energy consumption of the past, yet way less output even with that same energy consumption. So it's like a bizarre future of the economy, because
yeah, I mean, progress is not evenly distributed, right? So like right now, America is not the most polluting country in the world. It's like China and India, I think. Certainly India is horrible, right, for pollution. And it's because there's this kind of like wave, we'll call it the wave of progress, At any given time, the rich and the most developed countries are on the front end of the wave. They're on the surfboard, right? Everybody else is kind of in the wake. So where in the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, nobody else is industrialized except for like Europe and America, right? And so they were the most polluting things. If you look at the way that like the rivers and water in London and stuff were, when industrialization was bad, the river would like kill you if you drank it. You know what I mean? It would like you got in it, you would get sick. But they fixed that now because that's the way that it works. The front end of the wave is always getting like solving these problems and stuff. We're dealing now with post-industrialization problems. So if you have these three phases, you have pre-industrial, industrial, post-industrial. America in the 20s and stuff had child labor. We had all the stuff that's going on in Southeast Asia and Africa now, where there's sweatshops and workplace deaths and people working 12, 16 hours a day, right? We don't really have that more anymore. We made it illegal. It's just not really how it works. But so those problems get passed off to the other developing nations, and you still have places in the world that are not industrial, so they don't actually have industrial problems. We no longer really have the industrial problems. We have post-industrial problems. So in a post-industrial society, labor gets more skilled. I worked in a factory. I worked in two factories. I worked in the Tesla factory and Microchip Incorporated. And in both of those factories, I was basically operating machines that did all the work, right? So in the Microchip factory, we had like a washing machine that would wash microchip silicon discs with sulfuric acid, and a furnace that would like just toast these discs, right? So all I did ever, my whole job was just put things in, press a button, take them out. That was it. I not skilled labor at that point, but it was very complicated. I had like 3 weeks of training because working in a microchip factory is actually very crazy. There's clean room suits and you have to learn weird computer codes and shit, but really, really simple. I mean, probably like the average Walmart employee wouldn't be able to do it, but it's certainly not super genius work at all. It's like pretty normal, just high-end factory work. At Tesla, similar thing. We had a lot of training. At that point, I just fixed machines that wired the batteries together for the cars, right? That was all it did. That was pretty complicated, actually. There's a lot of ways those could fuck up. But again, not super complicated. And so you see the difference between like working in a steel mill in 1940, where you have to like, wear gloves and touch molten shit, and you might get your arm burned off or whatever. Like people have died in steel mills all throughout history. It's different, and that gets pushed out of the country. And we end up doing like similarly. I don't do factory work now. I do design work, which is a post-industrial skill, not manual labor. It's thinky work. I do consulting. I talk to people for money. That is not an industrial skill. That is a post-industrial skill, right? As this continues, at some point, theoretically, we're going to have a fully post-industrial world because the work will be automated by machines. And what does that look like? It looks like a lot of people on UBI, because the average required intelligence for people to work is going to keep getting higher and higher. You're not going to be able to do menial shit, because menial shit is the first thing to get automated. And so here we are, right? Like that's what we're moving into. And what I'm concerned about is not necessarily this transition, but whoever has the power when we make this transition, when the market gets, there's a concept called efficiency in markets. It doesn't mean the same thing as where you normally use the word, but a perfectly efficient market means that everything is priced exactly as where it's worth. So if I'm, say me, Sam, and Tabala are all selling cookies, right? I can sell my cookies for $10 a cookie because they're fucking super premium cookies. Tabala sells his for $5. Sam sells his for $1. In a perfectly efficient market, neither I nor Tabala are selling our cookies because Sam is the most efficient price. It's the most accurate to the cost. Like Sam makes 1 cent per cookie, right? Neither of us can make margins on our cookies because no one will buy them. And so there's no room to innovate because Sam is making the minimum amount of profit possible. And that's what efficient markets look like. Crypto is an inefficient market. So right now, nobody knows what anything's worth. It's impossible to know exactly what the price of Bitcoin should be or exactly what the price of NFT should be. So they're fucking crazy, right? Hey, it's $60 million today. It's 3 cents tomorrow, right? You have no way of knowing because the market is inefficient. Volatility, my hedge fund client that I just wrapped up with has a slide about this in his deck that I pulled up. It's basically volatility creates inefficiency, right? New technology creates volatility. Volatility creates inefficiency, and inefficiency creates opportunity. So when the world is inefficient, like America in the 30s, hey, guess what? There's crazy shit going on. There's kids in factories, but you can show up from Europe and just start your own business and do something, right? It's totally cool. Lots of people did that. If you look at like the robber barons and shit, a lot of them were like broke kids that just were fucking geniuses that worked at a steel mill or something, and they learned how to run it, and they learned how to scale it, and they learned how to get into other industries. You can look at like Howard Hughes didn't do anything until he was 26, and then it was like designed airplanes, flew airplanes, made movies. Like the markets were super volatile and inefficient. But as we progress, as we get more civilized and more regulated, the markets get more and more efficient, and opportunity dries up. And so people will say, "Oh, we want you to be safe." But what that means from a governmental and a upper class perspective is we don't want more people gaining power, money, or influence. So we're going to regulate the markets to the point where you can no longer make money unless you were already making money with us before we did that, right? And so that's the world that we're heading towards right now is, hey, guess what? If you don't play ball with Apple, you're not on a phone. Is it too expensive to make a new phone company because we're hyper competitive and we made deals with all the landlines? Yep. Fuck you. That's what it means, right? So the best hope that we have is that Elon and some of these other like rebel entrepreneurs and stuff are able to break these monopolies, whether they're governmental monopolies, economic monopolies, social monopolies, right? Media monopolies that prevent people from disagreeing with them and thus keep the markets efficient. Because if the markets are efficient, you're never going to get a better job, right? You're never going to be able to start new businesses. And that's the direction that we're going in.
And to extrapolate, like that means your family and your kids will never transcend the social class you're born into. So it basically locks in a caste system. And kind of to get to the point of the efficient market you're pointing at is the way banks and capitalists or entrepreneurs in general is they exploit that volatility or inefficiency to gain market share. And the analogy about cookies, or whether it's like, let's say Garrett and I both sell chairs. A big reason the central banks work the way they are about inflation and a credit economy is because of a thing called marginal economics. So it's like Garrett and I could both sell a chair. Functionally, they're chairs. You sit in it. Now, the marginal economics is like, okay, whose chair is more comfier? Whose, brand makes me feel better? And, a lot of these like deeper psychological questions about behavior and economic behavior. But the interesting thing about it is this same mechanism in which Garrett's pointing out to you, the roadmap for that is the central bank digital currencies. So it's like, instead of you being able to just change $100 or $5 or $20 about, a loaf of bread or, anything, they can enforce the control and track it and surveil it in real time through that central bank system. And like back to the point of post-industrial issues, one of the big issues with democracy and capitalism is just the language it uses to describe not first world countries. Pointing out. So like when you're talking about emerging markets or Africa, they're like, oh, they're third world or second world. And that just means they don't have as much of a financialization as the first world. And it's like this plateau type of thinking of like, okay, like this is just where you need to go. There's nothing more to it once you get beyond that. And it's just not innovative thinking, because it's just taking the historical thinking and saying, okay, this is the ultimate barometer, when like these new ideas and these new ways of doing business, the new way of doing transactions and the new way of building or innovating is not, it's going to be outside the box, right? Or outside the glass ceiling that's currently in place. So it's very important to have a mindset of how do you kind of go beyond. And all the great scientists or innovators or just historical people or philosophers throughout history, they've always been at basically the edge or the fringe of thought or reality, at least in like, especially in social perception. So
Yeah, I think the key is that the most effective thing that people could do if they were able to do this and organize around doing it. And then I got to go here shortly, so this will be kind of the closing point, but this is kind of a takeaway, right? The degree to which you participate in a system that has so many people in the social ladder or the power ladder, whatever, the more you participate in a system that is impossible for you to climb the social ladder of, the more fucked you're going to be, right? You just can't wait. You literally, if you're a dirt broke farmer right now, maybe you could find a way to revolutionize farming. Maybe you know something that no one knows about farming, and you can somehow figure that out better than these massive like Monsanto companies that are putting billions of dollars into this shit. Maybe you could do that, but it's unlikely, right? And it's increasingly more unlikely. You're not Andrew Carnegie, who can go from working in a steel mill to running the steel mill, right? It's not like it was 100 years ago. So the most effective thing you could do is, instead of participating in these impossibly large hierarchies, this weird global hierarchy that exists, right? To find ways to not participate, right? To start, if that means like you start working together with your friends and family to grow your own food, build your own houses, make your own clothes, buy your own land, and then exit the system and do whatever you have to do to stay out of the system. You can participate too. So what, like the way that this would work functionally, because just like being Amish isn't enough, but if you could go and say, hey, like I work remote, right? I do all my design remotely for the most part. I have one in-person client right now. I could go buy land wherever. I could buy land in Argentina and build a giant like house and have my family there, and then we buy more land as a team, and then maybe we have a neighborhood and stuff like that, and just we do everything ourselves. We grow our own food, all that kind of stuff. You're free. If you can exist in an economy that isn't tied to the global economy, then it doesn't affect you, other than if they decide to send the military to your house to kill you, or which is possible. It happens when people do this, but generally the people that try this are insane, right? It's like Jonestown or the Branch Davidians in Waco or whatever, right? Don't do that. You don't need crazy ideologies. You literally just like live a simpler life and be responsible for your own stuff, because the degree that you let other people be responsible for your life, your livelihood, your sustenance, all of these things, is the degree to which you can be turned into a slave of global corporate interests when they decide to do it, and they're trying. Look at the shit around eating bugs. There are a lot of companies that make normal looking foods out of crickets now, or like all this fake beef shit, which is just plants and industrial solvents and plant like seed oils and lots of things that are really bad for you. That's the way the world is going to go, because it's cheaper to do, right? And efficient markets mean everything gets done as cheap as humanly possible. If Caballo and I are making chairs, the winner is not the person that makes the chair that sells better. The winner is the person that can afford to only make 1% profit and make more chairs, right? So if I have a factory that makes chairs, I don't need to make that much money. If I can make 1 million chairs and make a cent on every chair, right? If I only make a profit of 1 cent on all the chairs, Caballo can't compete because he makes them by hand. So now I price them out of the market, and you only get factory produced chairs, right? So whatever you do, get involved with your community. Use the global market, like participate in it, make money in the market, whatever, but take it out. Take the money out of the system, spend it on your community, spend it on people you agree with the values of, because when you put money back into it, you make it stronger, right? And we are all guilty to some degree because we participated in convenience, and that's how it gets worse, right? When you participate in it, it gets worse. So find ways to take money and power and resources out of the system, take it back, and do it off the grid, right? Don't, if it's Starlink, if you don't have to go in and give money to Apple or give money to Google, don't. Avoid it, right? And it's not something, I'm not saying like go live in the woods right now. I'm saying make the transition and understand that if you're not making this transition over the next 100 years, your family is going to be fucked until there's like a violent revolution. Like you'll never escape it. So you have to understand that this is the way things are going, and freedom is going to be a choice that people make and suffer for, because the alternative is going to be far more suffering.
Wow. That was
good
deep.
philosophy club.
Mic
That
drop.
was probably one of the best philosophy clubs we've had. I was hooked the whole time.
Standing ovation.
An hour went by so quickly. Come on,
Standing
BU.
ovation.
BU, stand up, BU, stand up.
All right, thank you all. All right, I gotta run. I'm 2 minutes late to the client meeting. So good talk, everyone. That was great.
All right, man. I'll wrap up the stream. Thank you so much, Garrett. Guys, that was our resident philosophy officer and a brand design specialist in Triba. We're incredibly blessed to have him part of this group. He actually helped with all the Triba branding, and he's the one who recommended the book, Tribe, by, oh man, I can't remember. I can never remember the guy's name. Young? And that book was very influential in the mindset and mentality of collaborative community, cooperation instead of competition. And building this community has been my pleasure, in meeting people like BU and Timbalo and all the awesome people who are watching and listening and participating in the discussions. You know, if you haven't checked out the Discord channels yet, I know there's a lot of information in there, but go to the tags channel and get specific tags. We'll tag you for the events you want to see. There's philosophy, marketing, sales, investing, technology, information, all those things you can identify with. Then we can talk about them in group discussions, and that's what it's all about. So thank you guys for coming out and listening and joining us. We hope to see you again next time, and as always, have a great day. We will catch you later on the Triba Talk Show.